This episode is powered by Specialized Recruiting Group in Livonia, helping businesses find top-tier talent and professionals land their next big opportunity.
Welcome to Ghosted by the Machine, a podcast where job seekers break through the algorithm and finally get heard. No filters, no bots, just real conversations about what's actually happening in today's hiring system. I'm your host, Mark Lane, and today's guest is someone trying to bring more honesty, empathy, and transparency into the hiring process. Alex is the creator of Ghosted.work. I love that name. A community-driven platform focused on the real human impact of candidate ghosting. Alex, welcome, Ghosted by the Machine.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mark.
So, Alex, was there a personal moment or experience that inspired you to start Ghosted.work?
I don't think there was any single moment. It was sort of mounting frustration about the realities of hiring right now. I think that this combination of feeling obligated to provide a tremendous amount of personal information just to not hear back from companies and not having a source to a destination to kind of vent or even talk about these experiences openly is is ultimately what led me to the need to have something that kind of brings some attention and accountability to the behaviors out there.
Your experience, you were out of work or right
I
now.
absolutely, yeah. I'm in the bread line with everyone else. But yeah, last June I lost my job. Being 40 plus and being in this new hiring environment, it's completely different than anything I've experienced in my career. So that's where a lot of that mounting frustration came from is, wow, a lot of folks in my network, limited jobs being offered. So you got to open it up to more national searches. And that's where you have this volume and quality problem, along with companies not treating you like a person.
So, what was the moment you realized ghosting wasn't just frustrating, it's becoming a real emotional and professional issue that people needed support around this?
Yeah. I think that the way that I think about it is there's no ability to understand what I'm doing wrong. Right. And so I think after a couple months, you start to have mounting, if I can use that word again, mounting financial pressure. And I've got two kids, I'm post divorce, so I take care of them half time. I've got my own place, and seeing that bank account go down, I reached an inflection point where I'm feeling like inadequate in my job as providing a household, being a sole breadwinner for my family. And, I think ultimately for a lot of folks, it starts to really and impact their day to day life. For folks that treat job search like a full time job, it feels like you're failing every day, right? You're not accomplishing what you're setting out to do. And even if they're canned rejections, just the repeated rejection every day. I'm not an actor auditioning for parts, yet I feel like that's what I'm doing these days, where it's just constant rejection, waiting to get cast. And then I think that finding out just how many fake jobs there are, just how many jobs either don't exist, are being filled internally, or just flat out fraud or scams. You start to find out real quickly that 20 to 40% of the jobs you're seeing, you don't even stand a chance. So it's a frustrating environment, I think, to be in. Again, I think it was that combination of things kind of coalescing into an inflection point that really hit me.
And then mentally, that mental roller coaster.
Totally. You get excited, you start making life choices. Okay, I can take this pay cut or only to just be ghosted, right? It's
Talked about that earlier.
absolutely, absolutely.
So you built this platform, this whole program about ghosting during the hiring process. Are you getting any feedback from job seekers telling you right now that companies still aren't, fully hearing it?
Absolutely. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, I'm going to be biased because of the community that chooses to participate, but I've seen, if anything, increased poor behavior from companies. I've not seen efforts made to really address this issue. I think AI has made it worse, and we can get in more,
Yeah.
to that later. But what I'm hearing is that there's just more and more failures to close the loop of hiring. There's more and more silence. I really have not seen any improvement. And just so you know, the way that we handle things for now is we encourage folks to reach out to us individually. We do ask for evidence. So we don't just post at your word. We really go the extra mile to make sure that what the information we're getting is like truthful and you're representing the situation well. We delete anything personal and ask you to obfuscate anything that you don't feel comfortable sharing to us, but we delete anything you give us, and then we don't mention your name. We don't call out individuals at companies either. We focus on the company. You never know somebody's situation, a recruiter situation at a company. So or hiring manager or anything else. So we focus on bringing attention to the company. And if we've at least started some conversations internally at that company, that's the best, we can hope for.
So go through the process.
Yeah.
Let me know exactly how the process works.
Yeah. So there's really two ways to reach out to us. Right now, we're active on LinkedIn from a social media standpoint. So on LinkedIn, just reach out to the alias and we'll have a brief, if it's just in chat, that's fine. If you want to, talk on video, that's fine too. We just want to know your experience that, you have an issue with. And so we provide then a draft of our post to you. And we don't post anything without your approval. So that's one channel. The other channel is to reach out to us on our website, Ghosted.work. And there's a contact us form that we'll receive and we can have the conversation in that way. So it's pretty lo-fi at the moment, but it's also where people are at right now. So easiest to just make things simple and we don't need you to sign up for something, you're just free to reach out.
How long have you been doing this for? And are you busy with this? I mean, it's got to be.
Yeah, I mean, so I've been doing it for about 9 months or so. I don't think we started the LinkedIn account until January. Last year, me and a couple partners worked on the platform itself, like an actual product that is not public facing at the moment. We took that as far as I think is reasonable and then decided, anything like this is kind of nothing if nobody uses it. So our focus has been more on building an online presence and providing that core mechanism for people to reach out to us and for us to be able to call out bad hiring practices on existing platforms. And so for now, that's our focus. We've seen some pretty good traction since January. I like to think like a like on LinkedIn, especially with our content, is worth about 100 likes on Instagram. The fact that people even want to associate themselves with us or support us, the fact that people just aren't as social on a platform like LinkedIn, I like to think that, each of those likes or followers is worth, more than its weight compared to other platforms. So yeah, it's a part-time thing, I don't collect money from it. I myself am looking for work. So between me and a couple other folks, we might be a whole person always working on it, but most of our time is just spent filtering and looking at the content that we're provided and just paying attention to trends and whatnot out there on existing platforms.
It definitely gives you insight on the company if you're looking at.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And, the thing is, too, is I feel like there is this, a lot of companies talk about customer experience. I think there's a pretty good case to be made that candidate experience is now customer experience because I know that I am far less likely for B2B businesses, if I have the option to use a different product than somebody who has ghosted me in the past, it's you're creating barriers that I don't think, you realize you're creating when you treat people poorly about wanting to work somewhere. And ultimately, these people are going to be decision makers about your product, in some way, shape, or form down the road. So I would make a case that, there's just as much of a financial motive as there is a societal, human aspect to this.
So how much of today's ghosting problem do you think is driven by AI and automation?
I think, to be clear, AI didn't create the problem. I think what AI has done is accentuate, amplify existing cracks in the system, right? So that's sort of my vantage point is I don't think AI is creating new problems. I think it's making existing problems worse, primarily around volume. And that's volume on both sides. The amount of jobs and job descriptions and how easy it is for companies to reach out now nationally, especially with remote work, is a different ballgame than when everything was more regional. So I think that's on that side. And then, of course, on the other side is you've got even bots or fake resumes. You've got folks, spinning up, applying to 1,000 jobs a day, kind of thing with all these tools. And that's only going to get you so far too. And it creates, a volume problem on the recruiting side of things as well. So there's pain on both sides. But to be clear, candidates didn't create this system, companies did. And all that's happening right now is AI amplifying a system that was already broken.
So what do you think the human cost of silence is in the hiring process, especially for people who've been searching for months like yourself and myself at one time and starting to question their value? Am I good enough?
Absolutely. I mean, what do I think? I mean, it's a big human cost. I try my best not to get my hopes up during an interview process. And it seems these days we're doing 4, 5, 6 rounds. We're providing all kinds of case studies or, these mock presentations. And there's so many more hoops these days. And especially when in a tough market, you might be making financial sacrifices. I'm willing to accept this job, even though it was, less than what I was making. You start making these decisions. You're like, okay, I'm feeling good about this role, only for, you know, not to hear back all of a sudden after all this effort, 4 or 5 rounds. That's a unique kind of pain, you know, especially when you've already kind of questioned your financial value. Like, okay, I'd be okay settling for this. And then you still don't get it. It's a unique kind of letdown. I also just think societally, like, can you imagine, just if we're talking about productivity in the workforce and you have a section of the population that's unemployed, the amount of time wasted, the collective time spent applying for jobs that you don't have any shot of getting is got to be vast,
Yeah.
you know? And so there's just like a huge toll and drag that I think this creates. Also, I think you see longer and longer hiring process, out there, right? So now, companies want to find a deal. You have a lot of people unemployed. Maybe we can get somebody for this price. They kind of drag things out for 9 months, right? Unless you're hiring a CEO, these should be much shorter cycles. And so I think in a time of tough employment, there's plenty of jobs, but it's almost like a game of musical chairs, only the music has slowed. And so that just drags down the whole market, because I still see a lot of jobs. And to be clear, this isn't COVID, this isn't 2001, this isn't 2008. Those were worse job markets objectively. But I think this time is unique in the industry that it's affecting, particularly technology. And then you just have these longer cycles. And I think it's a real drag to our economy and to society and to the emotions that we're all.
Well, we all remember when we first got into the job market, pick up all these skills, learn this, learn that, put that into your toolbox. And as things gone on now, didn't matter. It didn't matter that I have all these tools now. And then you look at these job descriptions and you apply for a job. I'm listening to you speak and I'm like, God, I was there. I was there. I remember this. I remember putting a list together, an Excel file of all the jobs that I applied to. but you have all these skills now that you've accumulated over the years, and you apply for a job, and you're hoping you won the lottery that your keywords all matched up. Yet you have more than what they asked for. But that's we don't want that. We don't. It's just
Yeah.
it's like winning the lottery. You don't.
I also, it is like, it feels like that.
And if you go through that process, you're talking earlier about, you getting you might have a job, or you're applying for a job and you're hoping, and then you don't get called, and then you get ghosted. It's almost like a grieving process. It's almost like you're going through a death.
Oh yeah.
It's just the emotional stress that you're going through and putting your family through it. So there, I'm sorry, I'm getting off my soapbox.
No, hey, I mean, we could also have a therapy session. I mean,
Yeah.
I can invite you to my next one with my therapist. You know, it, it's just as much as I try to remove emotion from it, the longer you're unemployed, the more difficult that becomes, and I've found myself getting far more nervous because of how much each of these interactions matter the longer I'm unemployed. Right. And I feel like that can be tough to tamp down during an interview process when so much is riding on each interaction. And, sometimes when I have trouble tamping that down, I don't feel like I'm representing myself as well as I could. And it becomes a very negative feedback loop.
So where do you think conversations like this go next if we actually want the hiring process to improve? How do we get that human element back into hiring? And then we can only knock on the door so many times, kick it in, throw grenades, whatever we got to do to make them listen.
Yeah. I think it's more of that. Um, I think that we have to drive accountability. There's not really sufficient ways to do that in a way that's going to change the system from at least the candidate side. And in my opinion, the only way to really change things is to create a challenge or problems for companies to solve. So, what that means to me is, again, not about calling out individuals, but calling out companies. And I think, in a world where we are expected to share and be willing to provide all kinds of personal details just to buy that lottery ticket, if you will, uh, you know, we're providing all kind of demographic information, our phone number, our address, everything unimaginable if you were signing up for anything else, much more than anything else.
Well, think about what they do with that human capital, or what they've done with it.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is we don't even know. I think that's part of the problem, right? Is there's this, opaque layer that we can't see what they're doing, right? We don't get feedback. We don't understand how they're using this information. All we know is we're not really treated like people in the process. And part of the problem is that the platforms that collect this data or provide access to jobs, they're not interested in sharing that information either. And so the idea of Ghosted is to really try to tap into that negative emotion, but to be able to be in a position where we have trends and data to be able to drive accountability in the behaviors and bad hiring practices of companies out there. And so once you have that kind of information, then you can start driving some ultimate, accountability in the marketplace. Because I really don't think folks intend on being bad actors. But if you think about a recruiter being stuck between, their 10 hires they need to make, in the next 6 weeks, and 10 different hiring managers that are keep going back and forth on what they want, or being way too picky, or, you can imagine the situation where to us as candidates, it feels like we're getting burned, but in reality, we're just dealing with somebody in the middle with having to deal with hiring managers that don't know what they want, or don't feel the need to kind of drive a more succinct or effective hiring process. So I think the way that you address that is you start to drive accountability, which starts to drive conversations internally, which starts to open the door for different behaviors, which I think then opens the door for different kind of technology to help drive a better system.
I always go back to attitude reflects leadership.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you wonder if these leaders will pick up on this.
Hey,
Really,
think
they're the
about the
ones.
cost. Think about the cost to the company. Like when I drag a hiring process out for 9 months, I've wasted how much of my time, how much of my team's time to interview candidates, how much of the recruiter's time. It's a drag on the company, right? But they kind of get a pass. Maybe they have some power or authority there. They kind of get a pass. Hey, wait for somebody that fits the bill, or with the excuse of like, a bad hire costs, if somebody quits or a bad hire costs X amount, right? We're so focused on that metric. Well, what's the cost to drag out a process for 9 months? You could have the worst person ever, which would have at least been a contributor for 9 months, right? Rather than drag down everybody's time when you have a need, right? And in this world where we're all trying to hustle, there's all this money being thrown at AI. We're all trying to move so quickly. Isn't it weird that companies sit there with open roles? I think the quicker your cycles, even if you make a bad hire here and there, the quicker your cycles, the more competitive and, the more you're going to beat out the competition.
So I have a story of a process that I went through, and then I want to ask you one of yours before we end this conversation. I applied for a job. It was for a manufacturing firm here in Metro Detroit. I got the interview, went through the interview process, interviewed with the manager or the VP for this position they were in a different state, but the job is here in Metro Detroit. I did the interview, gave them some ideas on how I would handle the position. I could back it up with information or skills that I had done in the past. The interview I thought, was very, very good. Reached out back to them. Hey, thank you very much for the interview. This was late October, and I asked, when do you think you'd get back to me? They said sometime before Thanksgiving. So it was like a 4-week window there. Didn't hear anything back through Thanksgiving. Reached back to them early December. They said they had hired someone. So
Without any communication.
no communication. Early in January, I happened to see that same job being reposted.
Right.
Reach back to them, reach back to the HR department. Hey, I see the job is now open again. What happened? Well, that person didn't work out. Are you going back to the process again? I felt pretty good about this. What's going on? If we're going to move forward, we'll get back with you. Absolutely nothing. Now, I had also had someone working there that I had known and made friends with on LinkedIn, and she was checking it out for me. Hey, we'll do backstory. We'll find out what's going on. We'll get back. She came back and said they hired someone. Looks like they hired someone internally after the person didn't work out. Okay. Thank you very much. So that was a 4-week process. I'm sitting, God, I really like this job. It would have been a drive, but I can care less. I really wanted this job. I was really in tune with it. I had the backstory. I could handle this job. I was crushed. Didn't go on a drinking binge or anything like that. But I
You're better than me.
few hours of sleep. It's a family show. We'll talk about that later. So yeah, that's one of my stories. I've got plenty others, but that one really got in that space where I'm really frustrated. What do
Yeah.
I have to do? What more do I have to do? Gave them ideas, talked about, you should be doing this to communicate. I have contacts that would help you, blah, blah, blah. I had everything together, blew me off the wall of the charts, man.
And it is difficult for me to choose one.
Yeah.
There's been a variety of different behaviors, when I think through these past 9 months or so. And sometimes also it's a bit of like, I don't know why, but that's it. Right. Sometimes it's not even that bad of a thing, but you've just sort of exhausted yourself. I think one thing that I like, because I got a rare glimpse into the sausage making machine because I had an inside track, and that's always fascinating. But I'll I'll sort of give them the respect of anonymity. But it was an interview at one of the FANG companies, and very excited about this job. Would have been really great job. I felt like I was reaching a little bit. I'm not going to lie, but it was within my reach. After all, they wouldn't be talking to me if that weren't the case. So I didn't get very far in the process. I got to 2 rounds, and the second one was with the hiring manager. Kind of like a story you were sharing earlier. The hiring manager showed up 5-10 minutes late. It was about a 45-minute call that we had booked, right? And so, she also had a hard stop. So we're trying to kind of compress everything. Well, lo and behold, like we still got through her questions. I felt like, you know, I did fine. Maybe I'm my own worst critic, but I felt decent about it and felt like I covered what I needed to. Could have been smoother, etc. But, you're trying to look at your performance and be objective. Well, so I didn't move forward. That was disappointing, but I'm really curious why, right? And of course, you're not going to get the why. But I had a buddy, I have a buddy who works at this company and is pretty high up in the like talent acquisition department. So he can kind of peek under the covers and see all the notes. Well, this person, that the hiring manager, had said that I took too long to answer questions. That was the core part of the feedback.
Huh.
And that was, again, sometimes I feel like this is why they don't say anything, but very odd to show up 10 minutes late, get through all of your questions. So you had the opportunity, we had time and you had the opportunity to clarify or to have a conversation. I'm more conversational, right? Rather than like, let's have everything answered in a star format kind of thing.
Right, right.
It's just how my brain works, for better or for worse.
Well, and it's your cadence. It's how you speak, and you're trying to, you're trying to answer the questions properly and think
That's
about
right.
it. It's a part of the interview process.
Right. And again, I kind of kept tabs, and their hire was a great hire, you know, but that one really hit me because it started to feel like, well, I had no shot at that anyway. This person had made the decision before I even showed up. And I think that starts to really paint a bleak picture of you want to build yourself up and show up. And it's hard to do that when you sort of get experiences like that, where it's like, it wouldn't have mattered. I could, it literally, there's nothing I could have done because this person came in predetermined of my destiny, and that was it. Right. So there's something about that one. Again, sometimes there's far worse behaviors I've seen, but that was one that really got under me because you start to feel like, does it even matter? Like, right? It's like if you're going into something predetermined, it's hard to keep that motivation.
Well, Alex, I appreciate you being on the show today, and the fact that you guys are building something that give job seekers a voice is, as far as I'm concerned, it's amazing. Like what I do, we want to hear their stories. We want to hear how the journey is going for them, and if we have to expose what these companies are doing, we need to get them out there. Got to make some big change.
There's a big community out there. It's nice to feel like you aren't alone also, and to talk to just amazing professionals like yourself going through the same thing. You start to realize, man, there's so many, I don't have to feel bad about myself because look at all these people that I know are so great out there going through the same thing.
And that's why we do the show. We want to shine light on what the people are really experiencing today in this hiring process and this horrible system that we're all part of. So if you're watching and listening and thinking, yeah, I felt that too, you're not alone. And if you'd like to share your story, feel free to email me or send me a DM. And if you want to stay plugged into the real stories, real insights, and the real humans like Alex behind today's hiring system, make sure to follow and subscribe. We've got new episodes, new shorts, and conversations every week. Also now we're really excited. We're part of the HR channel. You can stream this live on Roku and on Fire TV. And if your organization believes in making hiring human again and wants to support conversations like this, we're opening a few sponsorship spots, so feel free to reach out. I'm Mark Lane, and this is Ghosted by the Machine, because behind every application, there's a human. Let's make hiring human again. Alex, thanks again. We appreciate it. And we're going to come back to you down the road. I want to hear more about your stories, okay?
Absolutely.